welcome back to Bending the Narrative here on the Aspect Network. I'm one of your hosts, Kate Kroonquist, and joining me every week to discuss the latest and greatest in the world of Avatar is Alex Batts. Alex, how are you doing?
I am doing great. I am so excited to dive into the series proper, the animated show. So today we're going to be going back to where it all began with the two-part
Mhm.
premiere of Avatar: The Last Airbender, with the episodes The Boy and the Iceberg and The Avatar Returns.
But before we dive in, we want to take a moment to thank everyone for all of your support on the first episode. We've seen a great response to the show so far, and everyone who has watched and interacted with us far, including Sebastian Amoruso. Hello.
Pretty cool.
And without further ado, Alex, let's dive in.
Thanks, Kate. So, as I mentioned, after discussing the live action series last week, we're starting our rewatch of the series with the first two episodes, directed by Dave Filoni and written by creators Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko. But be warned, we'll be talking about spoilers for the episode and the
Hmm.
series as a whole as we get into these conversations. So, to start off, I want to start the conversation with the intro, because especially in the first episode, the intro is different than the rest of the series. It like starts out with these beautiful like matte paintings and Katara like going through
Hmm.
and really setting the stage for the world and giving the audience all that we need to know like immediately from the rip. And it's just gorgeous to start, like you see it in there. I love the vistas that they give, and kind of like starting out the world, and it gives you so much information but in a really
Yeah.
distilled way, and like it trusts the audience with that, which I think is great. And I think that's a really strong through line for the entire show, but especially like these opening episodes, because there's a lot that they kind of need to like dive in there and get into. So like,
And
what do you think about,
fast. Yeah.
yeah, like this intro, and especially it being kind of different from the other ones?
I love it. I think it's so creative. I think it's genius because they know what we know already and they don't have to keep repeating that. I like that they do cut it down in the next in all of the other episodes. But for those who don't know, in this first episode, Katara talks more about her grandmother telling her these stories. She mentions there was a time of peace where the Avatar kept the peace between everyone. 100 years have passed, and the Fire Nation is nearing a victory in this 100-year war. She also mentions that 2 years ago, the father and men of her tribe journeyed to the Earth Kingdom to fight the Fire Nation, leaving her and her brother to look after the tribe. And that's her and her brother, not just Sokka. We need to point that
Hmm.
out.
Yeah.
And she also mentioned some people believe that the Avatar was never reborn into the Air Nomads, and then the cycle has broken, which I think is an interesting little tidbit and gives us a good look into the world. And it's a great idea to have that be longer because this is a whole brand new world. It's for kids. Nobody knows what's going on. We've never seen this world before. This is completely new and invented. So it's a
Yeah.
great quick way to get all of this information in. And it's just it's a big thing about the show is this beautiful exposition. They
Yeah. And I
do it
think
in
that
such a good
also
creative way.
her being like, I still believe that the Avatar will return. Also, in the middle or at
Yes.
the end of this exposition, like you're still seeding a very important part of her character, and that she does have hope and like belief in the Avatar. Like as a person, even before she gets to meet him directly, like she's still like, no, I
Hmm.
think that this is a valid thing, and this will help the world heal. And that's a really like you get that even when you're getting the what's essentially an exposition dump, like it's
Yeah.
like like you have to set up stuff for the audience, you have to get them to know that, but then it is still even putting like important character information in there. And I think that continues immediately with the first scene as we get Katara and Sokka, canoeing in the ice, and you
Hmm.
immediately get where they are as characters. You have Katara trying and kind of failing to waterbend, which also you get waterbending immediately in the show. Like you see it
Immediately. Yeah.
so quickly and you're like, oh, okay, like I know what this is now. I see it in practice. And you get the explanation for what it is and the state of it in their tribe by Sokka being dismissive of it. Like he it sets up his character because he's automatically being sexist and dismissive and
And
talking down to
yeah.
Katara. But it also gives you like what you need to know as far as like, okay, she's the only one there that can waterbend. Like that's a very important thing as well. And
Yeah.
so it's just is a consistent thing that this show does where it's giving you that information in very character driven ways as opposed to just like telling you things. It's letting the
telling you things.
characters like have normal conversations and you get the pertinent information that you need from that, which is so cool. Like
Like
it's
they kill
awesome.
so I hate to phrase it like this, but they kill so many birds with one stone.
Oh, they do.
Literally
They like
everything they do.
they line them up. There's like 8 in a row and they're like, "All right, we're just
Yes.
going to hit them
And I'm
all."
like, from this one sentence, you learn so much. Like the way Sokka calls it, I think Katara's like, it's not magic. And then Sokka
Mhm.
goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, it's an ancient art, important to our culture. And you get so much from that about their relationship, who he is to her, how he feels about that, how Katara feels about this, how, like,
Yeah.
all of the birds dead with the stone.
It's
It's,
all yeah, it's
it's
immediately
genius.
there. And
Like, you
then
could have taken the easy way out, but it's smart.
yeah,
They do exposition in such a great way.
it's all just rooted in character, which is the like I think the most important thing that the show does, and they do it so
Yes.
consistently and so thoroughly. And it also, yeah, he also I did notice says he calls it magic so many times in the opening
He
episodes. He's like,
does,
"This is
yeah.
just like dumb magic or weird magic or whatever." He calls like Appa a magical flying
A
thing.
magical freak or
Yeah,
something.
and it's
Yeah.
like, it just shows you exactly where he is as a character. And we also get a very, very important character moment for Katara whenever they like crash, they break their canoe, and then they're stranded now. And she starts freaking out. Well, she starts getting angry at Sokka because he's, of course, being dismissive again. And
Yeah.
so her temper flares, and that's how we get the inciting incident of the show, which is
Yes.
her like breaking the ice, and then we get the iceberg and we get the titular boy in the iceberg, and that's how Aang comes out and we see him for the first time, which is that sequence also is just stunning. Like it's such good
It's so
animation.
gorgeous.
Yeah,
I
it's
remember somebody talked about I think actually one of the creators talked about this, the background painting and how
mhm,
many hours they spent on those beautiful background paintings. You could see, I know this is in a later episode, but some of them are watercolors, some of them
mhm,
are oil paintings. And it's like, oh my God. I think like a big thing about this show is they go the extra mile when you don't have to. They did all of this
yeah.
extra work, they put in all this extra effort when it wasn't necessary. Like they wanted to. They wanted to put in this extra work. They wanted to make it their freaking magnum opus.
And
And it
it
was.
you can feel it. Like you can it makes and leaves such an impact because of that. You're like, oh, okay. Like it's just such a there's such striking images and such like a profound thing. Even the opening, to go back a second, the opening tracking shot of them whenever you're, going through all of the ice and the
Oh,
water and
the
stuff. It's
ice
just,
and it's
yeah, it's just like such a long, like swooping camera angle. It's like you don't see that in like Saturday
you don't
morning
see
cartoons
that.
most of the
No.
time. That's not a normal thing, and it really helps it stand out and stand apart from that, which is so cool. So we get Aang busting out of the iceberg and like
Mhm.
falling and stuff, and their reactions to him are very, again, in part with their characters. Katara
Yeah.
immediately wants to help, and Sokka's immediately like, "This is not our problem.
Defensive.
We
Yeah.
need to go. Like this dude just came out of an iceberg. We don't know what's going on here. Like we should get out of here." And it just again immediately puts them like where they're at character wise at the beginning of their journeys and sets it up
Hmm.
so well.
And
And
this is
it's
what,
just awesome.
in the first 2 minutes? Not
Yeah, two,
even.
3 minutes, maybe. Like
I
it's done so quickly.
like you don't even realize how little time has passed
Hmm.
and how much information you've already gotten. It's done in such a way where you, as the viewer, you don't even know that you now know all of this.
Right.
It,
Yeah, it
it's
just is it's a very subtle thing.
it's very cool.
Hmm.
Um, and then also I want to talk about immediately Katara and Sokka's sibling relationship
Yeah.
and how accurate it is. I remember watching this in 2008, and I was like, that's exactly how my brother and I fight. I have an older brother, and we bicker just like that. I always yell at him. I'm like, you're being sexist. Like, oh, just because I'm a girl, you don't think I could do this. And then he's always like, I'm better than you at everything, and I know best. It's
Yeah.
so accurate. It's so good.
And
They
that's such a, great thing to see. It adds that layer of it being so genuine. So you're like, oh,
Yeah,
I can relate to this, or I've seen this, or I know people. Either you either know it personally, or you've seen people that are like that, and you're like, okay, like yeah, that's
like
how
I
that
know
relationship is.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
which is
have you
awesome.
seen some sibling relationships and shows and they're like, "Hello, brother." They're like,
They're
"Oh, it's
just
my brother." "Oh, hello,
so
sister."
they're
I'm
so
like, "Who
wooden.
talks like that?"
Yeah,
Yeah, they're
it's
so
just
wooden, or they're like, "I love you so much, brother." And I'm like, "No sibling talks like that." Like,
that's not really how that goes, but
yeah,
sure,
that's
I
not how that
guess.
goes.
Maybe.
Love him, but I'll never tell him that.
Right? Um, so we get them. Katara immediately realizes that he's an airbender also because he sneezes and goes like 100 feet up in
Yes.
the air, which is
Yeah.
hilarious. He just like
And he
sneezing. And I also love, I mean, I guess it makes sense because it's been 100 years since the airbenders are gone, but like the fact that they don't immediately recognize him as an airbender because of his outfit, I think
because
is
the
kind of
outfits and
funny.
tattoos, yeah, it's
Yeah.
very interesting.
Which like it does make sense though because they it's not like they would have seen any airbenders in their lifetime, you know.
Yeah, no.
So him launching himself to the air is a pretty good giveaway, um, which is funny. And then we of course get the hilarious bit of Appa refusing to fly. He's so grouchy at the
Love it.
beginning, which is
I love
great.
how Crouch Race, which makes sense because I feel like
He's been sleeping for
the
100 years.
yeah, the Avatar can survive this. Like he's the Avatar, but Appa's just a normal animal.
Yeah.
How the I think I'm not going to think about this too much because I love this show, but how did that animal survive?
The Avatar
Was it with
state
Avatar magic?
extends. Yeah, it's just Avatar magic is how that works, which I think is fair.
Well, I'll let that one pass.
Well, and I mean the Sky Bisons are the original Airbenders, so like they maybe he's got a little pocket of I don't know the
Fair.
airbending and the Avatar state, and Appa's just that cool.
Or maybe he hibernates. Maybe it's like a
That
hibernation
would be
state.
wild if flying bisons hibernated.
That would.
That'd be really cool, actually.
That's a question for the creators, I think.
Yeah.
We're gonna send in
Um.
mail.
So we get all of that, and we get them going to leave to go back to the Water Tribe, and
Mhm.
also we cut to Zuko on the Fire Nation ship because he saw the giant beam of light that
The
came
giant beam of
from
light.
the iceberg. And I love again how immediately we establish Zuko's character and
So
just his
fast.
like determination and like I only
Hmm.
care about this, nothing else matters. Like screw your tea and cards, Iroh. I want to go get this guy. Like I need to go do this so I can go
It's so
home.
good.
Yeah, which is great. Like it's and again also establishes Iroh with like nothing. Like we see
Nothing.
Zuko and his so like intense determination, and Iroh's just sitting there playing dominoes and his tea. Like he's just chilling. He's like, yeah, I mean, we'll get there, or maybe it's nothing. You know, you always trip out about whatever, Zuko. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
And
And I
they,
do love that he mentions he's like, we've been down this road before, Zuko. Like,
mm-hmm.
they've done this a lot. They've been on this journey for a while. And
Which
you
is
immediately
another.
get their relationship. Like, yeah, Iroh's cool and calm. Zuko's hot headed.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to
And
capture the Avatar.
do they? I can't remember. Do they mention like in that scene that they've been going at it for 2 years? Because I know they mentioned in one of these episodes that
No, that's
the
later, I
exact
think.
time. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
probably when they're talking to Zhao, if I would guess, or
Hmm.
not like talking to Zhao, but like going to get repaired or something. Um, but yeah,
Hmm.
it's still that line that like we've been down this road before really gets you the information that like they've been doing it for a while. Like this is
Hmm.
not a first occurrence thing where this isn't his first, like they just left and are now trying to like
Yeah.
get there,
Which I
which is
just
cool.
realized something, a parallel. This is okay. This is for my Zutara shippers out there.
See, we got
I know. Don't roll your eyes. Don't roll your eyes. And so Katara and Zuko, I think both lost or were separated from their fathers both 2 years ago. Then, because 2 years ago, then he must have had. It was both at the same time that same
yeah,
year.
I hate that so
I
much.
just
I'm
put that
so mad.
together.
I'm
That's my
so
Zutara
mad.
shippers out there.
No, we can't. We'll get it. We'll have to get into their stuff,
We'll get
especially
into
later down the
that.
road whenever we get real into
I just like the idea of it.
I'm not a fan. Not a
But
fan. But it's fine. It's okay. It's fine.
it's okay. I
Um
think it's for the girls.
um yeah, so they're they're established super well, which is great. We also get
Mhm.
the like honor being the backbone for Zuko. He's like, I need to restore
Honor.
my honor. Like that's the
Mhm.
like the driving force for
The
him, which I
driving
think is
force.
really cool.
Mhm.
Um we
Because he does
also
say one point at this episode, he goes, their honor didn't hinge on
on finding
finding the
him.
avatar. Mine
Mine
does.
does. Yeah. And it's
Mhm.
like, okay, that one this show is so good. It one establishes
It's
like
like,
his backbone, but then also establishes him being different and like set apart from everyone else in one line. It's so good.
In one line. In one
Yeah,
line.
it's incredible. So we go back to the main crew and they're floating along
Mhm.
on Appa and Katara asks Aang what happened to the Avatar and we again immediately get a huge part of Aang's character where he
Mhm.
deflects. He says, "I didn't know him. I knew people that knew him. Like I'm not sure." And it's
Yeah, he
him not
lies,
wanting yeah, he lies. He's
which
avoiding
is
that
interesting.
responsibility. Yeah, he's like shirking it off and is like, I don't know. I don't want to deal with that. Like, that's too much. And then
Mhm.
we get the glimpse of the nightmare that
Mhm. That shows us
shows,
kinda like how he got there.
yeah, that shows him and Appa getting lost in the storm and having to like use the Avatar state, which also, first time we see the Avatar state
Mhm.
really, besides like, him breaking out, but
And
him
breaking
actually
out, yeah.
going to use it to make the like ice cocoon, which is crazy that you can do that with the Avatar state,
That's
honestly.
so sick.
It's
I think
so
I put in
epic.
my notes, I was like, ice circle, ice sphere. I couldn't think of a name
Yeah,
for
it's
it.
just a
'Cause I like
crazy
ice cocoon. That's a good word. That's a good
yeah, he
word.
like cocoons them in there, which is wild.
Cocoons.
So we get that, which is cool, and then we have him waking up in the tribe, and Katara sees all his tattoos and stuff,
Mhm.
which is a great moment, I think, too. She's like,
Yeah.
"Wow, this is
She's
a
like, "This guy's
wild thing."
legit. I've
Yeah.
never seen this before."
Hmm. And
Um,
Grand comments about the Airbenders being extinct, which, like, we know from the show's title that Aang is obviously the Avatar in the Last Airbender, but
yeah.
to then establish it, 'cause you do have to establish that in the show. It's a really
Mhm.
like big thing to establish that the airbenders are gone because we now at this point have seen three of the four nations with
Yeah.
the water tribe and the fire nation, and now we've got the last airbender. But that's a really heavy thing to introduce like immediately in the show, and we don't really get to
Mhm.
more exploration of that for two more episodes, but it's still very pivotal to be introduced immediately, which is really cool. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's just the whole can. And then of course we get some of the fun stuff, where like Aang's being a kid and not wanting to like do anything.
He
He's
was
like, "Oh, let's go."
ignoring his issues, which
Yeah,
relatable. Everybody knows that.
100%.
Every
He's like,
12-year-old kid is like, "I don't wanna do homework. I don't wanna focus on this real thing I have to do.
yeah,
I'm just gonna focus on the happy, fun things." That's what
hmm
kids do. That's what 12-year-olds do. He's a real 12-year-old.
he very much is.
Like,
Um,
yeah.
so we get through all that. We get Sokka's important stuff where like he's very much about trying to train all of the kids and
Mhm.
whatnot. And he's like, "This is my responsibility. I've got to do that." And we see this show is full of so many visual comedic gags where it's like,
So
all
many
right,
good ones.
he's like talking to him. He's like, "All right, soldiers, like get ready," and then it cuts and it's just like kids. It's literally like they're like
I
5 to 8
gotta
years old.
pee. It's my favorite
Yeah,
line of all time. And I love too because those are actual little kids that they got in the voice acting booth. I forget who the voice acting
that's so
um
funny.
director was, but they got actual little kids in the booth and they got them to
Hmm.
yell at these little things. And you can really hear that. It's not because most of the time they get a woman to do a little boy's voice because their voice never changes, but you can
Yeah.
tell they're real little kid voices and they're so cute.
Which is so funny. So we get the little like again, shrugging off responsibilities and
Mhm.
just wanting to have fun and like stuff around the tribe, and then they go to explore. Aang and Katara go to explore Fire Nation ship.
Mhm.
'Cause Aang is like, we should go check this out, and they go in there and they end up setting off some traps, which is not good, and what Aang had been warned about. But he's like, no, it'll be fine. And
Yeah, he'll be
then
like, "It'll be good."
he's like, no, no worries, it's fine. And so they get in there, and he's able to use the airbending to get them out of there, which is
Mhm.
important and clutch. Like, good job, Aang.
And
But
clutch.
yeah, come on, Aang's able to get them out of a lot of situations, which is nice. But
Mhm.
that does trigger a flare that alerts Zuko to their presence, and he like zooms in.
Yeah.
And I love the line where he's like, he's agile for his old age,
For his old age, yeah. Zuko
Because
still thinks
Zuko
he's like 112 years old.
which is a logical assumption to make. Like, if you think that the Avatar has survived, your assumption isn't going to be he cocooned himself in an iceberg for 100 years and is still a 12-year-old. Like,
Yeah.
that's not what you're
Because
going to
who
jump to.
wasn't there an avatar who lived to like 200 years old?
237, and that was
Which
Kiyoshi.
so like it's a logical assumption. Like,
Yeah, so
that
he's like,
makes sense.
there's history that, an Avatar could live that long, and also people in the Avatar universe just live super long anyways. Like,
Yeah.
Gran is pretty old. Katara, I don't remember how old she ends up being whenever she dies eventually, but, like, she also
I
was
know, yeah.
old. Like, characters in that universe have pretty long lives, which is
Yeah.
cool. Like, good for them. Love that.
It's very
Um,
cool. I
so,
also
like
love the way that we cut back to Zuko, back to this, but the way we cut
mhm.
back to Zuko is that we see Aang jumping and then we just see it through his
Oh,
telescope
the
and then
telescope.
we're back to him. I just think that's so creative.
It's such smart transitions. Like,
It's smart transition, smart writing.
yeah,
It's
it's all
genius.
it's all so good. So that basically like wraps the first episode, the first part of the premiere. And then we get into the
Oh,
second one.
we did forget to mention though that Katara does think of Aang as could be a waterbending teacher,
Right.
and
Yeah, which is
Aang could
important.
be her master, which is
Mhm.
important.
Which is
And then they
funny
bring up
cuz
the Northern Water Tribe, and yeah, which
mhm,
is funny because
cuz he has no clue.
he has no clue how to do any
Yeah.
of that
And so they do bring that up. Well, yeah, which is important. And that's another like major thing that's established in the first episode.
in the first
Like
episode.
they get so much out there in like 20, like less than 20 minutes. Cause if you're
Yeah.
counting credits and everything like that, like those are a couple minutes. So like there's so much information there and so much character work there, just like immediately from the first episode. And so then
Yeah,
we
that was my
go,
main note about that episode.
yeah, it's just like it goes. And even with like you get like five
It
minutes in the
goes.
middle that's them just like messing around, like at the camp, but it's still and this is again something the show continues to do. It's smart, like messing around. Like it always
Hmm.
is in the service of the characters of either establishing their motivations or their personalities or like consistent or recurring themes or problems or whatever that they're going to have throughout the show.
Yes.
Like that's what
Like
the
everything services the story. There's nothing
yeah,
that they put in there because they're like, this will be cool, or I'm going to put this in there just because I want it, or because
or
I thought of
like
this idea and I like my idea.
mhm,
They cut all the cheese. There's nothing in there that is they cut the cheese. There's
yeah, all of it. There's
they
like
don't need anything unnecessary.
yeah,
Everything in the episode is necessary.
there's
It's
nothing in there where they're like, oh, well, we are at like 17 minutes and we need 19 minutes. Like, what can we
yeah.
put in here for 2 minutes to fill the time? Like, that's definitely not what happened.
Yes.
So that's that episode. And then we go to the second
Yeah.
one, which is like the back half of, I guess, and really escalating to the conflict. But we do get the normal intro this
Hmm.
time and the shortened
Hmm.
intro, which also I know that you found something which was pretty cool. The person who does the previously on Avatar thing, which I did
I
not know
never
about
Yeah, I
until
never
a
thought
few
about
minutes ago.
that. But I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, that's Roku's voice."
Yeah, which is so cool. Like that's such a
So
great.
cool.
And
He has a great
also,
voice.
I'm sure that you've probably noticed this, but I love that Azula is the firebender in the intro,
Yes!
which is
Like, we already get a seed of what's to come.
which is crazy because she doesn't show up until the end of the season. Like
Yeah.
she's not there until the end, but she's also there at the very beginning. If you know, if you,
Like, it shows you that they knew. They knew where
yeah,
they were going. They knew what they wanted to do. I love
hmm
shows like that. Um, like if people out there, if you watch like Attack on Titan, that's another show that does that, where you know since the beginning, since episode one, the creator knew where they wanted to go. They had the idea. The whole story was fleshed out. It's so good. It's so smart.
it's amazing.
I hate there's some shows where you're like, oh, they didn't know where they wanted to go with this.
Not this one. Full
Not
plan
this
the
one.
whole way, which
Full
is
plan.
it's so
It's
good. So
refreshing.
we
Yeah.
get them coming back from the Fire Nation ship and the confrontation between Aang and Katara and the rest of the tribe, and Sokka being like, I knew that this guy was a traitor. I knew he was a
Hmm.
spy. And again, great character stuff. We get Aang being like, okay, I see that I've put everyone in danger. I will leave. Like, that's on me. I'll go. And Katara's like, all right, well, I'm going to go with you because she cares so much. And also, slightly selfishly, is like, this is probably the only chance I'll have to get a master to like learn waterbending more.
What? Yeah.
Which is, that's such an interesting, I think, like push and pull in her character in that moment. And that, like, she is doing it because she cares about Aang, but she's also doing it because, like, she's like, well, I kind of need him a little bit, I think, like, which is
Yeah. Like this is my one
really,
opportunity. How many opportunities do you get in this middle of nowhere South Pole village?
yeah,
Like
it
she
just,
wants to get out.
it doesn't yeah, exactly. She's like, this is the opportunity, I have to take this, which is cool.
Hmm.
But then eventually, Aang talks some sense into her. He's like, look, this is your family. Like, I can't let
Mhm.
you leave. We get one of my favorite line deliveries and like animations in the show when the little girl is like, Aang, don't go, I'll
"Aang,
miss
don't go."
you. It's
I
just
did write in my
so,
notes, I said, "And my heart shattered in a million pieces."
yeah, it's so pure. It's such a good moment. Um, so
But I
yeah,
do love how
Aang,
too this shows us how wise Aang is, and that
mhm,
it really shows you like, oh, he was raised by
as a
monks
monk. Yeah,
as a monk.
he,
Like even though he's 12 years old, he's very wise. Even
mhm,
though he lied about one thing,
mhm.
that I feel like the
It's,
lie is a very 12-year-old thing, but everything
yeah,
else was
it's a very it's a very normal like child like it's that like again push and pull in his character and that like he knows what the right thing to do is, and when push ultimately comes to shove like he'll do the right thing. It's just that like he'll take those easier in the time being like outs to avoid that at first, and it's not until he really starts seeing the consequences of taking those easier outs or kind of like shrugging off whatever, that then he'll be like, oh,
mhm,
okay, I need to like, this is what I need to do. Actually, I need
yeah.
to really be like more responsible for that. um so that's cool. We get Aang leaving and like going to chill. Sokka prepares for the Fire Nation to come in. I
Mhm.
love the
I love his
introduction of the Fire
yeah, with
Nation
his
here.
warrior face paint, and
Oh,
then
Sokka's warrior face paint, that's such a cool look.
it's
Honestly,
so
he looks,
cool.
so great.
And I love
um
how they parallel him getting ready with Zuko getting ready, and
mhm,
he's having his butlers or whatever they are, servants, putting on the uniform for him and tying it up in a very ceremonial way, where
yeah,
Sokka is doing it all by himself. He's hyping himself up alone in this room.
mhm.
He's alone.
That's
And
one of the things I like, that contrast, and that was one of the things I took a specific note on, is that I love the immediate visual contrast we get between the Fire
yes.
Nation and the Water Nation, especially like obviously in the red and blue being different, but like the
Mhm.
Water Tribe being all the cloths and the more rounded like contours and things like that, whereas the Fire Nation is all the steel and metal and like very sharp
Yes.
and like heavy, and the Water Tribe is all the wooden stuff and more natural and like part is
Hmm.
earth, and like it's just such a clash of like the industrial versus the normal like cultural like living off the land type stuff, and like you immediately
Yes.
get that in the show. You can
Yeah.
see it's a smaller like microcosm of what the bigger war is, where like the Fire
Mhm.
Nation has just tried to conquer everything, and like this is a very small and like specific version of that, and you can just see it immediately. This is episode 2.
Immediately, you
Like,
get it. Episode
and
2.
like it's all there visually, and then we get the incredibly intimidating Fire Nation landing there, and I love the way
I
the ship
love it.
opens.
Yes, I
Like
love, like, how it
Balog
comes in
Bridge.
through the fog and you see how ginormous it is and how threatening they are,
Hmm.
and you immediately get a vibe for how the Fire Nation has taken over the world and how imposing they are, and,
Yeah,
yeah, how it opens, that front little pointy
it's
thing
such,
comes
yeah,
down.
that's such a smart ship design for like a siege
Yes,
ship, like to come in and just like,
and
also
it
I would be
cuts through the
terrified.
ice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it
It
says
does
so
show
much
how
about
brave
Sokka
Sokka.
too. Yeah, he
Yes, how
literally
brave he
stands
is.
there and he's like, "All right, well, I'll do. I'm the only one here that can do this, so I'll still do it." And you're
And
like,
he's
"Oh,
what,
Sokka."
16?
Yeah, and
At
you're like,
16,
"Sokka,
I'd
you're."
be out of there. I'd be like, this is not my problem.
Yeah, I'd be like, "We gotta go, guys. Like, we can
We
find somewhere
gotta
else
go.
here to like chill. It's
I'm
not that big of a
out.
deal." Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I love the fight between Sokka and Zuko because it again shows the difference in their training, and like one who
Hmm.
like really knows what he's doing versus one who's like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, but doesn't really. And how Zuko just dismantles him so quickly. Sokka gets the boomerang shot in, which is cool.
Hmm.
Love that for
Hmm.
him. But then of course, we get Aang coming back to save them and take responsibility and be like, okay, he fights Zuko. I also love how many times we get to see Zuko and Aang fight. Like we get it here,
Yes,
which is
immediately.
cool. Like it doesn't they don't hold out on getting your main character and main villain conflict for like till the end of the season or like halfway through
Yeah.
the season or anything. Like
Hmm.
we consistently are going to see them go at each other, which is awesome.
Which I remember they said in the original plan, the creators said that they were gonna, it was just Fire Lord Ozai.
Hmm.
And I think the main producer at Nickelodeon, he had the idea to make, he was like, they need an actual conflict to fight with now. Like they need
Yeah.
somebody to face off with now. and
Yeah, you
then
need
build
like a
up to the
driving
main
force against
boss.
them.
Yeah.
Hmm. That makes sense.
Which again, genius. And to make it a
Yeah.
kid,
Hmm.
to make it
It makes
another,
it makes it so smart. It's so
what is
smart.
it where he's like, Zuko's like, he says, I've spent years preparing for this encounter, training, meditating. You're just a child. And then
Yeah.
goes, well, you're just a teenager.
It's
It's
such a
so
yeah,
good.
which is so good as a comeback, but also a really I feel like that's something that kind of is forgotten a lot of the time, how young they
Mhm.
all are. Like these are all
Yes,
kids. They are children, all of them.
they
Like
are.
none of them are over 18. They're
No.
going on these worldwide adventures like globetrotting and
Which I think is one of
well
the big things that the live action did. It really shows you, like, oh, yeah, that is
are
a
kids.
kid.
Yeah,
That's a
those are children,
child.
which is wild to think about and to see. And then again, we get a moment of Aang taking responsibility and being like, "Hey,
Mhm.
if I go with you, will you leave them alone?" And Zuko being like, "Yes," which again goes back to his whole honorable thing because that's the honorable thing to do, as opposed to
Yes.
just being like taking him and then also still
Fighting
just
everyone
like,
and killing everyone.
yeah, like wrecking the village no matter what. I mean, he already did some damage,
Mhm.
obviously, but like,
Yeah. But it's a
being
small
like,
thing that shows too, I think, with Zuko that he doesn't wanna do that.
yeah,
Like, Zuko
he,
doesn't want to hurt people
mhm. He's not all in, and we get more on it the later we go, but he's
later.
not
Yeah.
all in with like what the Fire Nation's all about. He's
Mhm.
again more so just about his character and wanting to get his honor back and doing things in that way, which is
Mhm.
great. Um, I love going forward a little bit because we get them kind of in the Water Tribe like rebuilding some stuff and figuring some stuff out. We get
Mhm. After the
Sokka,
ship leaves and everything.
yeah, we get Sokka and Katara. Katara being like, "We have to go get them. We have to go save Aang and stuff." And it's
Mhm.
such a great character moment where she thinks she's gonna have to like convince him, and he's like, "I already
Yeah.
have the boat packed and ready. Like, are you gonna come with me? Like, come on." Which is great.
It's
It's an
so
amazing.
good.
It's such a good character. Like, he's learning already. Love
And
that.
good, like
Like,
another good sibling moment where that happens, where I know like there would be sometimes as a kid, I was asking my older brother, like, can you drive me somewhere? Like, please, like, I know you want to say no. And then he'll be like, no, let's go. And then you're like, oh,
mhm,
wait, we're not always
yeah.
fighting. You don't always
Yeah,
hate me.
it's such a good like it's just a great bonding moment and great
Yeah.
like we are on the same side, like you are my sibling, like come on, let's go do it, let's
Yeah.
do the right thing, which is great.
And
um
Grand then joining in.
yeah, and being like, you're gonna need this
Queen.
if you're gonna go, which is so cool. Not just a on the whole very tender moment that we love to
Hmm.
see.
And she
um
has the very important line where she says, Aang is the Avatar. He's the world's only chance. You both found him for a reason. Now your destinies are intertwined with his. And like basically go off, which that's like,
single
there it
single
is.
P.
Okay, the series has started.
Yeah, that yeah,
That's the point
that's
where I'm like, and we're set in motion.
it really puts everything into gear, which is cool.
Yeah.
Um, we get back on Zuko's ship. Zuko, is happy that he's got the avatar. Aang gets
Hmm.
taken to a cell, and then airbends his way out of there. Something that
Hmm.
I made a special note of for like all of this action stuff is that Aang is doing nothing but defensive and evasive maneuvers.
I wrote
He's
that
not
down
attack
too. Yes.
he's not attacking
Yes.
anyone, which is so cool. It's such an air nomad thing to do, and I love how they immediately show that through his choreography and through his combat or
Hmm.
lack of combat, I guess, is that he's not trying to fight anyone. He's just like, let me out of here and let me not harm anyone
Yes.
as much as I can. And that even carries over into like he goes to find his glider and he gets into Zuko's quarters and Zuko's been waiting for him there, which is also such a smart character thing
My
for Zuko.
favorite fight. Yeah, smart character part for Zuko, but his fight cracks me up all the time.
I love it. He's just like behind his back for like half of it, and just like Zuko's trying to get to him, and Aang is just behind him, and he can't. And then he's just
It's
evading
so
him.
smart.
Yeah, it's so smart. He wraps him up in a Fire Nation banner, which is
Mhm.
hilarious.
Which he immediately
Um,
burns
it's
and
also
destroys
got
everything.
there's so many great little character beats throughout that entire sequence.
Mhm.
He ends up getting to the top of the ship, gets his glider, starts to glide out of there. Which again, the glider is so sick. Love the glider.
Wait, we
We
missed
didn't
the
even
mattress bit. I need to talk about
the
how
mattress.
Aang
Oh, okay.
hates
Oh yeah, because
Zuko with
those
the
are
mattress.
no, that's important actually because those are the two like offensive maneuvers that he uses, and
Yes.
like as soon as he actually uses his offense, he immediately wipes the floor with him. Like it's not even close.
Immediately.
Like as soon
And
as he's
also how
actually
How offensive is it to do it twice? Like, he hits him once and then he does it again. And I'm like, that was
Yeah,
just mean. That was the
yeah.
second one to be
Just puts him in his
mean.
place real quick. But yeah, that's a great thing is that whenever you see him not holding back and not being defensive or evasive, like it's not even close. He just
Yeah.
absolutely mops the floor with him to get
And
out.
it shows you like how powerful he is without the avatar state. Like,
Yeah.
Aang is insanely powerful for his age.
I mean, that's why he's got
And
his
he's
tattoos.
that's why he's got tattoos.
Yeah, which is
I think
awesome. So he gets to the top of the ship, goes to get out, and
mhm,
then Zuko ends up grabbing on and like pulls him back down to the deck as he's flying, and so we get them
mhm,
fighting and stuff. And then we also get Sokka and Katara on Appa. I forgot to mention it, but we did get Sokka doing the yip yip
oh,
thing to
yeah,
get
yeah, yeah.
Appa to
He's
fly earlier
figuring
on,
out.
which is he's like going through. He's like, "What did that kid say to get he was trying to get him to fly?" And so we get them flying, which is awesome.
So good.
Um,
And I
and
love Sokka
then
gets so excited. He's like, "Oh my god, we're flying, we're flying!" And
mhm.
Katara's
and
like, "Now you're excited. Like you're."
yeah,
He's
and
like,
then
"You're
he's
not
like,
all the tough
"Oh,
guy."
and
I don't
then he
really
like
care.
quickly like tempers it down, and it's like, "Oh, this is whatever, I guess," which is
Yeah.
hilarious.
So
Um,
cute.
so we get that, and the final battle, ends up with Aang falling precariously
Mhm,
into the water, and we're all worried about it. But then the Avatar
mhm,
state kicks in again. So
mhm,
2 episodes in, 2 times we get to see the Avatar state, and he
mhm.
just does some insane water bending to
Same.
just absolutely mop the floor with the entire ship, wrecks the ship into the iceberg, gets them stuck,
Mhm,
and is able to get away. And the gang is able to regroup on Appa and kind of fly off and stuff, which is
mhm.
amazing. And that
And I do
really
love
like,
like when Aang passes out on the ship, Sokka and Katara come in and
mhm,
Sokka's all defensive, but Katara's worried about Aang's health and safety. And
mhm,
then Katara uses waterbending for the first time defensively.
yes.
She
Oh
throws the
yeah, she's
ice
able
at
to like,
them.
yeah.
Yes.
I
Mhm.
love that she messes up at first
Yes.
and like throws it to Sokka, and so she just does the exact same thing. Like she does how she messed up because she's like, oh well, I did it that way, so like I'll do it that way
She does it
again.
behind herself.
Yeah, to like freeze them, which is cool. Um, and yeah, we get them flying off into the sunset and being like, okay, well, we have a general mission now. And then we again get Aang being like, well, we're gonna make all these pit stops first, and it really
Mhm,
sets the stage for where the show is gonna go from there.
mhm.
And
And I love
I,
this ending too. This is Appa
mhm,
flying in the sunset, and we have the kalimba music, and
beautiful.
it's so beautiful and peaceful, and I just want to live in that moment.
Yeah,
It's so I
it's
love that's a
gorgeous.
lot of people's favorite moment. It's artistically gorgeous, the colors,
Hmm.
just I can't talk enough about
It's beautiful.
how well
We love
done
to
it
see
all
it. We
is. Every
absolutely
aspect of it.
love to see
Yeah.
it. So those are the first 2 episodes, the overall plot of the first 2 episodes. Did you have more that you wanted to like talk about those specific moments before we get into, our later comparing and contrasting stuff and
No, like I'm ready to compare and contrast. So, you know, when we come back, we're going to talk more about these episodes, comparing and contrasting, and how they compare it to the live action series. So we'll be right back, guys. All right, and welcome back to Bending the Narrative. Last week, we dived into Avatar The Last Airbender, the live action series that dropped on Netflix. Well, you can find our overall thoughts on that season, that episode. Throughout book one, we will be discussing into further detail how each episode compares to the live action version. So, Alex, let's start with you.
yeah, so getting into it, I think the biggest obvious departure in the first episode of the animated series versus the live action one is the fact that we open the live action one with a massacre of the air nomads,
Yes,
which was a choice. We talked about it on the
as a
live action
choice.
one. It's a good sequence in the show. Like I think that they did it well, but it didn't. The animated series really, I think, highlights that you didn't need to spend that
You
time
didn't
on
need to
it.
see that.
Like
It wasn't necessary.
it was 30 minutes, and that's more than the entire first episode of the animated one, right? And we just talked about how much they're able to pack into those 30
Within like
minutes.
seconds.
Yeah, and the fact that you just don't need that. And there's a couple of lines dropped in these first 2 episodes that give you what you need to know about the air nomads not being around anymore. And
Mhm.
we'll get more into it next episode where they do really touch on the fact
Mhm.
that like what happened to the air nomads. But again, in that they don't show it. They make the decision to not show you those events happening. And I think that it's a much stronger show because of that. I think
Mhm.
that leaving that up to the audience's imagination and trusting that they will that whatever you can imagine is going to be more horrific or more powerful or
Mhm.
whatever than actually deciding to spend those crucial minutes, that crucial screen time showing that thing, and also money. Like that sequence looked
Money,
expensive.
yeah.
Like
That was an expensive sequence.
that's a lot. There's a lot of
There
VFX
was a
going on
lot
there.
of the
That's
fighting in that, a lot of
yeah,
the
that's
effects went into
there's a lot
that.
of actors. There's just a lot going on there,
And
which
that was like a
again is
big thing we were talking about. The series is so good because everything is necessary.
and that
Was
just
that
wasn't.
necessary?
Yeah, like it wasn't. It didn't. Again, it didn't need to be there. The animated series proved that, and so
Mhm.
yeah, that's I think like my biggest thing where I'm like, and but that like dovetails into the larger, I think, big differential point in these, and that the animated series really, really trusts its audience when it comes
Mhm.
to being able to put things together and with its exposition. It doesn't talk at you or to you as an audience, even whenever it's doing narration, like even when it literally is talking to you as an audience and giving you the exposition dump, it doesn't feel like that. It feels so much more genuine and so much more rooted in character versus
Mhm.
like, hey, you need to know this, here's why. It's more of this is it's more of just like taking your hand and like bringing you into the world as
Into the
opposed to
story and
like
trusting you can go along with it.
yeah,
And that's
and
for
give
kids.
yeah, it was, which I think part of it is probably because like you have to think about the attention span of kids too, and like kids are smart. Also, like one, they will know when the show kind of isn't really
Mhm.
trusting them, I feel, and they'll be like, "Well, this is kind of boring. It's just like telling me stuff. I want to
Yeah.
see something happen, right? Like I want to do things and be with these characters." And kids as much as adults, like we care about the story. Like a cool story is cool, but the reason we care about it is because of the people that are a part of it, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, really choosing to focus on those characters and the character moments and establish them all is, I think, done much cleaner in the animated series as
Mhm.
opposed to the live action one. Um,
And I think that's
also,
something that cements it in history. Like that's what makes
yeah,
it able to last this long. And the amount of times people have talked about this show, analyzed it, and they still can't find holes in the story and they still can't
yeah,
find like it's still we're still trying to find like I can barely find anything where I'm like if I really think hard about this maybe I can find a plot hole, but
mhm.
still there are ways to justify it. So
And I think
that's
like
interesting.
going with that, two of the notes actually that I took for the live action one were whenever Zuko confronts Aang at the Southern Water Tribe and they have their like first fight, and Zuko like sees him and he's like, "It can't be." Like in response to seeing the Avatar. What do you mean it can't be, dude? You spent 2 years looking for him. Like you, this should
Literally.
this should be actually like. Why are you surprised about this? This is your whole thing that you're going here to do. I
And
would
like we
hope.
just talked about, it could be
Yeah,
Kyoshi lived or which avatar lived to 200, you said?
Yoshi.
It
Oh,
was Kyoshi.
all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it.
So it
And
could
like
be.
he's like, it can't be. And I'm like, if you don't think it could be, then what are you doing here, man? Like, come on. And then
Exactly.
another thing is that Aang in the live action one, after Katara and Sokka like stand up for him, he's like, no one has ever fought for me before. Dude, I just watched an entire Southern Air Temple fight for you. They're like for the first 30 minutes of this episode in the live action version, right? Like they no, I just saw that actually.
No.
And that again goes to like, all right, well, if we didn't show that at the beginning of the show, then that line, I guess, could make sense. But by choosing to like add these things or change these things in these ways, they then give themselves contradictions that don't need to be
Mhm.
there in the live action show, which is so wild to me. Like it just I don't
It
understand
so
really.
obviously misses the point of
Yeah,
why we like this show.
which is they had the blueprint right there. And like I get wanting to make changes and the fact that it's going to be an adaptation. It's not going to be the same thing.
Mhm.
It's not going to be one for one. Like I understand. but
Mhm.
it's just like you don't really get the conciseness that you do with the animated series. You don't get the super clear starting points for the character arcs like you do in the animated series. Like
Mhm.
Aang in this immediately, like we said, the first thing he does is try to shrug off his responsibilities, right? He deflects. He says, "No, I didn't know the Avatar." And the live action one, he's like, "Well, we need to get going and like do this. I have a responsibility, like as the Avatar, and we have to go." And it's like, all right, well, like, what's your arc gonna be now, besides just like traveling to go get to learn, even though they don't
It's
even.
literally like the comparison between these two, I think, is coughing baby versus hydrogen bomb. That's
Yeah, it's I don't get it. It's a very
you can't
odd thing.
compare.
And they like lose so much of the emotional weight there too by doing that, because you rob them of the growth that we expect for them because we've seen
Mhm.
the animated series. And I get also that one of the big points of doing an adaptation to live action in the first place is to obviously pull in more fans, because a lot of people will
Mhm.
shrug at animation and say, well, I'm not going to watch that because it's animated, which is dumb, but it's a thing,
Which
unfortunately.
is
Like,
you're dumb.
yeah, but like that is a real thing. And I know that the show did absolute gangbuster numbers on Netflix. I know it was like,
Yeah.
had however many ungodly amount of views, which is cool. And that means more and more people are into Avatar now, which is great. But hand in hand with that, you get this version that's missing a lot of the
Mhm.
emotional weight or the like cleanness in
It's like
story.
studios
And
don't understand why an audience is liking the product.
yeah, like
I
I
think
don't.
the same thing like happened with Barbie. They're like,
Hmm.
"Oh, you like Barbie, so now we'll make a bunch of different movies about other toys." And it's like,
Hmm.
"No, we liked it because it was feminism, because it was
Yeah,
women, not
like
because
I
of
don't.
that."
Yeah, the reason people like Avatar: The Last Airbender isn't because it's called Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's everything else that comes with that, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't just want it in name. I want it in character and in story and world building and
Yes.
themes and like narrative and all of the stuff that makes it Avatar: The Last Airbender. I don't just
Mhm.
want the name on there and to see the familiar things
The reason
and
we still look at the Mona Lisa is it's because it's like this mathematical masterpiece. Like everything is
mhm,
so perfect about it. It's
yeah.
not just a drawing of a pretty lady. You can't just
Mhm.
draw a pretty lady and be like, it's like the Mona Lisa. Oh, I could do
It's
that.
like
Like,
no.
no, it's for the time, like it's done so perfectly. Like there's a reason we're still talking about a lot of old art pieces today. Like this is
Mhm.
the reason we still talk about this is because it's so perfect. It's
Yeah.
almost like to reach perfection is near impossible. And the
Mhm.
fact that they almost did that, that's insane.
Oh, it's wild. And it's the reason, like you just said, we're still talking about it. And
Yeah.
they just miss so much of that in the live
Hmm.
action one. These episodes also, um, it loses the comedy is essentially not there in the premiere. I mean, in most of the Netflix show in general, the comedy's not really there, but like
Yeah.
there is are so many comedic moments in these first two episodes of the animated series. Like I think part of it is that you lose the ability to do the same kind of visual gags in animation, because like a lot of it will be
Hmm.
like character expressions or character movements that like you can't really do in live
Yeah. Oh,
action.
like there's a part in the ship where Aang is looking, he's on the Fire Nation ship, he's looking for his staff, and
Mhm.
he goes into a room and Iroh's sleeping, and he slowly shuts the door, and like his mouth is still in the door, and he's like, sorry.
Oh yeah, like
It's
you
such a good gag. It's
yeah,
so
and
cute.
like the show is just littered with those throughout the entire
Yes.
runtime. All like just consistently it has things like that, and you aren't able to translate that to live action. I think they
Hmm.
And the thing that hurts is they try to get a lot of the like the meme moments in there, right? Like and it's getting
Hmm.
into like later stuff, but like I've seen the Netflix account posting like the Cabbage Man and stuff, or
And they're
like,
like, we got
whatever
him.
thing.
Haha.
Yeah, and it's like, all right, well, like,
Did you
yeah,
justify it though?
like that's a funny moment in the show, and like the fandom likes that, of course, but that's not why I'm watching the show.
And
Like,
why
that's
did they
not.
like edge it? They like edged it. They
I'm
wouldn't
like,
let
come
us
on.
hear it
Yeah, I'm like, come on,
until
dude.
the end.
we don't need that, I
We
guess,
didn't
but
need that.
yeah, it's there's just
And
so
yeah,
many examples
I would
like
also
that.
like to talk about the characters. There's one thing, what I love about Katara is in, I think like, I was watching this at 8 years old, and that was the first time I think I saw a woman on screen being angry and yelling
Yeah.
and it being okay and nobody being like, you need to be a little polite girly girl and
Hmm.
bow down to men around you and you can't be stronger than the guy, but
Hmm.
you gotta hold your own. But she was powerful, she yelled, she was angry. And my favorite quote is that the creator said what they wanted to do with this show is they wanted to tell boys to feel their feelings and girls to feel their anger.
Hmm.
And that
It's
was,
so good.
so many women are told to hide their rage, to not show emotions.
Yeah.
And like, here's this girl on screen, she's yelling and she's fighting and she's praised for it and she's
Yeah.
awesome for it.
And
Um,
she's very obviously the moral compass of the group too.
yes,
Like, and the only person that is telling her that she's wrong in that is Sokka, who is also, the show makes very apparent that
very
he's
apparent.
wrong for
He's
having
in the
that stance.
wrong.
Like that's his entire arc too. And so it's just like they get intertwined so well with that versus in the live action show, Katara's not really
Yes.
angry at all. And oh, this
Yeah.
is okay. Here's something. The inciting incident in the live action show, like
Hmm.
as I mentioned earlier, the inciting incident in the animated series, Katara getting angry and breaking the iceberg, right? That's how
Hmm.
Aang gets freed.
Yeah.
In the live action show, I don't know why the iceberg breaks and Aang comes out.
It literally just
It
does
just happens
because
because
we
it
need the story to happen.
yeah, it happens because it
Like,
it has to happen, but I don't know why, besides the fact that that's what happens in the show so that things can get started,
it's
but
like
there's
its
no
little timer went off and it was like, okay, it's time.
you're like,
Here I
"Oh man,
come.
it's been 100 years." Like Aang set
Oh,
his
so it's
avatar state
100 years, guys.
stopwatch like
It's so much.
for 100 years, and I don't understand how you can go so far as to not have a proper inciting incident. That's insane. That's like storytelling
Hmm.
101, right? And that's another thing where again going again going back to the air nomad thing and why we didn't need to open with that. You're
Yeah.
supposed to start your story at like if you're not breaking the rules, right? If you're not like
Hmm.
whatever director or writer who's made 20 movies and is now like going against the normal thing, right? It's
Hmm.
very good storytelling practice to start your story as close as possible to your inciting incident that's going to change the characters' lives, right?
Mm. Hmm.
That's why within like 2 minutes we have the iceberg cracking open and then coming out, and everything is changed from there. The avatar is
Hmm.
back into the world. Happens about 35 minutes into the live action series, right?
Yeah. And like we keep watching because we want to know, like, we keep questioning. We're like, okay, but why was he there? Why, like,
Hmm.
oh, I want to find out what that was.
Yeah,
Oh, like that keeps you interested in the story. If you know everything at the beginning, you're like, okay, well, I know everything. There's nothing I
yeah.
need to know, or that's going to keep me coming back for more.
It's just
It's,
again like trusting your audience to like, well, we'll get to that stuff later. You don't need it
mhm.
front loaded at the beginning to start the story.
Yeah. I
Like,
hate the comparison I just made in my head. It's like the show's a slut. It gives you everything up front. Why?
it do-
Why buy
it
the
does.
cow if it gives you the milk for free?
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, it just gets. I don't understand. Like it's such weird decisions all across the board that I just am perplexed by.
It
Like,
almost feels gluttonous. Like, I hate to describe it that way, but it feels like they just want to give you everything right away, immediately. No patience, no waiting.
yeah,
It-
it just
They're like, here it all is.
no,
And we're
what,
done. We did it.
yeah. So I
I'm
mean,
not
I think
happy.
I think those are most of my big comparison points for at least these two episodes for the
Same,
premiere
yeah.
thing.
There was, oh, I
But
did love Zuko saying, he ran.
yeah,
That's my
that's a
favorite
great.
bit.
I love that line delivery. I can't lie. I think it's so funny.
It's so like, and that
It's
does
in
make sense.
it's on point. He's so
It's on
mad.
point. He's an angry teenager.
He's so salty about
And
it.
his hands are here.
Yeah,
It's so
he's got
good.
the full oh, it's great. Love that. Um, so all of that said, up
Mhm.
next, it's time for a new segment we like to call Whispers of the White Lotus. We'll be right back.
Ooh.
Welcome back to Bending the Narrative. We're moving on to a segment we like to call Whispers of the White Lotus. This is a segment where we look deeper at some of the hidden narratives that we get in the series and discuss them further. We're starting this week with a line that Zuko has to Aang about not knowing what it's like to have parents because he was raised by monks. Kate, why do you think this is an important narrative bit for us to discuss?
Why I think this is important for us is because a lot of this show I think is about family. They touch on family. That's Zuko and his father's relationship, Zuko and his uncle's relationship, Katara and Sokka wanting their dad back, Katara's mom, which spoiler alert, but if you're watching this without having seen the show, I don't know why you're here. Um, but she dies,
Yeah,
and
rip.
how she's killed and rip. Um, and Aang doesn't really have a family. He doesn't have a genetic family. His family is all found family or these parental figures in his life, like Monk Gyatso.
Hmm.
Appa and Momo are technically his family. Um, and then I think that's why he attaches so much to Katara and Sokka. Katara and Sokka become his found family. And I think that is a big theme in the show. Um, and then the whole gang that comes together near the end, they're all a found family and they all
Yeah.
share that love in that way and fill that hole in that way. And it is something important, I think, to show children like why this show had a good theme and why it was good for Nickelodeon. Because
Yeah.
not every family is perfect and not every family is correct. Not everybody's going to have both parents or all or any parents at all.
Hmm.
Um, we talked about like Kiyoshi is an orphan,
Yeah.
um, and not everybody's going to have a perfect family, but you can still find that love and you can still find you could still fill that hole. It's not impossible. It's not something completely missing, but it is a thing that's out there.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing where they approach it from so many different angles through all of the characters. Like,
Hmm.
and it's also something that I hadn't thought about too much, the fact that Aang doesn't have those direct
Yeah, I
like
never really thought about it.
genetic parental figures, which also I am now thinking more about like how exactly the like logistics of all the air nomad monk stuff happens, like when because like obviously he did have parents, right?
Yeah,
like
like he's got
like
to come from
like
somewhere.
like he did have parents, but I'm really now curious as to like what exactly the process, because it's different by the time we get to Korra, obviously, because I want to be like, well,
Mhm.
we see an example of it in Korra where like,
Yes.
but that's different because they're having to like it's the rebuilding of the air nomads and stuff, and so it's really interesting to think about what it was like before, as far as like I guess as soon as they're born, they're just a community baby now, as opposed to
A
like the
community baby.
like I mean, do that
I agree.
like
And I wonder like if it was narrative wise they did it so they didn't have to address cuz like a big thing if Aang did have parents, I think a big thing for him plot wise and character wise would be him missing his
having to deal
parents
with
and being like
yeah,
and like a big topic of conversation you couldn't not just glaze over that. Like you would have to go into that.
yeah,
And I think
and so instead they're able to just really hone it in with like Gyatso and the different and like the air nomads as a whole. Like
yeah.
they shift his parental loss over to a much bigger loss as like his entire
Yeah.
people. Like it's not just his parents that he lost, it's everyone, which is
And like I don't want to
also
say that that's
wild.
it's not a cop out. Like I think it
Yeah,
is
it's an interesting change.
it's an interesting change, but it works.
Mhm. Well,
And
and it also
it's a
works
smart way to get around that.
because it's a big contrast. Like, yeah, it gets around that, and then it also presents another contrast between him and all of the other characters who do have, as you were saying, very pivotal parental relationships. Like Zuko's whole thing is about the fact that he's trying to get his father's approval and his honor back.
Mhm.
Azula will, later also be a big part of that. Katara and Sokka, their dad's gone, and that
Mhm.
is very formative for them. Their mother was killed, which is obviously like Katara's real big thing. Um,
Mhm.
and so like it's all of those things that kind of like meld and contrast and give us different angles of what families look like in that way, and the different
Mhm.
ways that that affects people, and like how they grow as people from that, and like how that makes them much different from each other, and kind of like what the different types of, for lack of a better phrase, like parental trauma like can do to
Yeah.
people, because like they're all very much not like super healthy parental relationships, like even though
Yeah.
Katara and Sokka's dad is great, like he's gone, which is a very big
Hmm.
thing that they have to deal with. It's not, fun. And so like you've got that, and then Ozai of course is Ozai, so there's that.
Yeah.
Like he's literally trying to conquer the
There's
world,
that.
so pretty bad dad there.
And like it's
But
addressed
then
even with like Toph later on, which we'll get
yeah, like
to, but with that
yeah, like
family and
yeah, her parents are also messed up for very different
hmm
reasons. Like they seem like great parents, but are also not. And so it's a very interesting contrast in the fact that Aang doesn't have that direct parental relationship, but he finds it through the mentors that he has to seek out, and then also
hmm
through his friends who become a family, and not necessarily a parental family, but more of a
hmm
just that support system that he needs, which is super interesting. And yeah, it's also like Kyoshi being an orphan is very fundamental to the way that she develops as a character and her stance as an avatar and like her world outlook and stuff. She's a lot
hmm
like she's super hard edged because of that. And like, not that there's no nuance in there because there definitely is, but like that's a very formative thing for her, as you could expect, like growing up an orphan on the streets would be. Like, that's,
yeah.
it does a lot there. And so, yeah, it's a very interesting thing to make the decision on the whole that like the monks don't have that parental like thing,
It's
and
like
they're
more of a community, which I find interesting. I wonder if they base that off of any real
yeah, because
community
like
in the world, if that does happen anywhere. And
the
I'd like
thing
to
that
know, like,
that's why I started
psychologically what that does.
yeah, that's why I started thinking about it more too, because like traditionally, from what I know in monks, like it's not that you like you're not a monk from like a baby, essentially. Like it's
Yeah.
something that you like find your way to and like then become. And so it's not like you like don't have parental figures. It's just like they're there, they're just back home, as opposed to like being, at
Yeah.
the monastery or not. And so yeah, it's an interesting thing and something that I think um probably doesn't get talked about a whole lot. Like
It
and
really doesn't get
ri-
addressed at all.
it's just a
But I
kind
don't think
of
it
like
needs to be.
yeah, it's just something that the show presents to you, and it makes sense. It makes so much sense in the show that you
Hmm.
don't think about it more. So you're just like, okay, yeah, this is how it is, and it's because you have all of those other relationships with the other characters and their parents that are super rich and super fleshed out in different ways, and then Aang
I
finally
wonder,
is
like,
able.
how this story would have changed if they did give Aang parents and what that would do.
Can't even imagine because they'd have to be dead, obviously, but like,
Yeah,
which
obviously.
rip. Yeah, that's wild. Um, it's so difficult to even try to imagine him having like parents. Like I
Yeah,
can't
like I wonder
picture
if
what.
that would become a main point for him. But I guess that would have become repetitive because if everybody else's issues are their parents,
Then you don't want to give that to Aang too.
Aang too.
So they're like, oh, we'll just give him losing his entire
Hmm.
people, which is
There we go.
which but that works so well for the like larger world building they're trying to do as well, as far as like this is why the Fire Nation is such a big problem. They wiped out
Hmm.
one of the entire nations. Like
Yeah, like,
they're all gone, which
and I do
is
love that it does
insane.
show like one of the main reasons that war is so difficult and
Hmm.
that it's rough because it separates families. It ruins families. It disturbs the peace.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see that
It takes people
repeated
away from each other. Yeah.
through so many of the different characters in the shows and their
Hmm.
families, which is
And the small little bits to the giant overall arc. It's
yeah, it's incredible. I love this
very
show.
cool. I did we
It's
mention that we like this show? I don't know if we
yeah.
did
I feel
enough.
like a couple times.
I think a couple times we mentioned this show's amazing.
Yeah. So I think that pretty much wraps our thoughts on for that segment for this week. Unless you had more on the whole Aang's possible parents thing, we should come up
That's
with
really I
names
just
for
wanted yeah. Mr. and Mrs. Aang.
Aang,
Aang parent.
Mister Mister
His
and
whole name
Mrs.
is Aang.
Airbender.
Mr. and Mrs. Aang. But wait, what's Pippin Patalopscoplicus?
Oh yeah, that's so
His
good.
fake name. What if that was his actual last name? Conspiracy theory.
Oh yeah, because like no one but the Beifongs essentially get last names in this world,
Yes.
which is also another wild thing. Um,
Ooh.
we'll get to that
Leave a
later though.
comment. Leave a comment,
That's okay.
guys.
Yeah,
Let me know
give
what you
it
think about
name
that.
name Aang's parents for us.
Name Aang's parents for us.
Just some light homework.
Just some light
Awesome.
homework.
Well,
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to Bending the Narrative. Get those tissues ready because next week we're visiting
Hmm.
our first air temple with the episode The Southern Air Temple. But before that, Kate, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at Kate the Official.
Awesome. And you can find me online at AP Batman with two T's. And please be sure to subscribe here on The Aspect at YouTube and any platform where podcasts can be found. Please give us a like, a comment, turn that bell on for notifications. And you can also follow us on Twitter/X, Instagram, and TikTok at The Aspect Co. Thank you so much for listening.
Flameo Hot Man.